Hi everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is a little bit different. It's not a sewing video, it's an embroidery machine video. I know, we've never done this on the channel before. This is the first time that I'm busting out the embroidery machine for a tutorial, but I play on my embroidery machine all the time, and I wanted to share a really fun project that I've been making quite a few of lately with all of you. So this little cutie right here is actually a mask strap extender. Now this design is from Crashing Waves. You know I will have all the links you need down in the description of this video. But this little strap extender is great for those of you who have to wear your masks for an extended period of time and maybe they're starting to hurt the back of your ears. What you do is you add this to the straps on the back of your mask, clip it. We've got these beautiful little snaps here. Snap it into place and then wear it. I'm going to demonstrate this for you. So here's a mask that I just made, and here's my little strap extender. What I'm going to do is, here's the back of it. I'm going to take my strap extender and I'm going to clip it. Now you see we have two extra little snaps here. So I'm actually going to clip it on the one closest to the center, just like that. Now I'm going to put my mask on and I'm going to clip the rest of it. So I'll show you. So now you see I have my mask extender clipped to the back. Now all I have to do, if I'm wearing my hair down, I'll just take my hair out, put it over, and there we go. Now I don't have anything behind my ears. My mask is completely covering my nose, my mouth, my chin. So you see, you can't really see it on the back, but if I decide to take my hair and put it up in a ponytail, just like that, now I have this super, super cute design on the back of my mask. So I think this is just such a fun, unique thing to add to masks. I know that masks are something we're all getting adjusted to. This is one of those items that's especially comforting, I would say, for those of us who might have to go back into school buildings pretty soon. This is an accessory to help reduce pain, but also to make something that's not so fun a little bit more bearable and a little bit more fun. I mean, this, anytime we can accessorize an item, it's a thumbs up, right? So we're gonna take a closer look at these strap extenders in just a second. Before we get started, any of you who have embroidery machines, will you please comment down below and let me know what embroidery machine you have? I will be sewing today on the Bernina 770QE. Now that is not a designated embroidery machine. It is a sewing machine with an embroidery module that you can attach. I have a lot of strong opinions about this machine, and we'll get into that in another video. But I really want to know kind of what the most common machine is. So if you comment down below with your embroidery machine, will you also comment if you like it? I think that would be very, very helpful for those of you who are shopping for embroidery machines, so you can see what other people are using, what they like, what they don't like. I want to send out a huge thank you to Tiffany of Crashing Waves Designs for allowing me to film this tutorial. I will have a link for her YouTube channel down in the description. She does her own tutorials for her own patterns. You know what's kind of funny is that I think most of us, when we think of embroidery machines, we think of monograms on shirts and hats, right? Like cute little designs and monograms, maybe on blankets too. But did you know on embroidery machines, you can make full projects like this, which is amazing. You can make bags, you can make stuffed animals. There's a lot you can do with an embroidery machine. And to be completely honest, Tiffany's designs for bookmarks, sanitizer holders, keychains, all of those designs are actually what got me to want to buy an embroidery machine. So Tiffany, this machine is all on you, girl. All right, this should not be a long tutorial. I have so many tips and tricks and things like that that I want to share with you, but I don't want to kind of overload you with information today. So we're really just going to stick with following the pattern. I will let you know the items that I use and why they work. However, if there is interest, I can put together a whole other video going over embroidery tips, tricks, and tragedies. If you're new to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. We have new tutorials coming out every single Monday and occasionally on other days of the week. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you have any questions, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. All right, guys, this is a fun one. Let's get started. So let's first discuss the fabric used in our strap extenders. I like to use vinyl for the right side and then felt for the back. You could use vinyl or cork here, but I do find that felt is an inexpensive option and it wears really well. It's also comfortable. For the center design, and now she has a bunch of different designs, but for the center design, I like to use fabric. You can use cotton woven, cotton lycra here. You could also use another piece of vinyl. This is a really fun way to play with a small design of your fabric and really shine light on an image that maybe in a bag would be too small to really see. Also, you see we have these plastic snaps here. Now we have one male end on the end of the strap extender on each side, and then two female ends towards the center. This allows the strap extender to be used in different sizes. So for example, when I'm wearing my strap extender around the bottom of my neck, I'm gonna have it on the tightest size because I need it to be nice and tight. However, sometimes I'll also wear my strap extender above my ponytail, and that does pull on the straps of my mask a little bit more. So then I'll put it on the longer setting, so the snap that's closer to the male end, just like that. So for today's tutorial, I will be using cotton woven. To be completely honest, I do prefer to use cotton lycra on these strap extenders. It's easier to cut and it doesn't fray as much. You can also stretch it pretty well, but cotton woven will also work. I'll be using this beautiful iridescent vinyl from My Punk Embroidery as the main exterior. And then for the backing, I will be using this blue felt. The design I'm working on today is just for one strap extender. So for that, I only need a 9" by 5" cut of my vinyl, a 9" by 5" cut of my felt, and then really just like a small 3" by 3" cut of my cotton woven or cotton lycra. So the thread I'll be using today is this Isocord 40 thread. I like to use two different colors. We will be making the mini version of this, which is the Minnie Mouse version. So I'm gonna have this nice red for the bow. The black is pretty much for everything else. For the bobbin of my embroidery machine, I'll be using this bottom line thread. You do need to use a different thread on your bottom than on the top. So on the top, I have my Isocord 40, and in the bobbin, I have the bottom line thread. You're gonna also want some cutaway stabilizer. Now this is pretty much the base of your embroidery design. This is necessary. I like to get a real big roll of this off of Amazon. If I can find the link for it, I will put it down in the description. You can find this at almost any sewing store. So now let's talk about the snaps. You can get these great plastic snaps kits off of Amazon. They come with tons of colors, and usually you can also find this included with it, which is a handheld snap tool. This is what I started out with. It works fine. However, if you make enough of these, your hand will start hurting. So I've talked about my rivet press in the past, but it's actually from Cam Snaps. Cam Snaps are known for their plastic snaps. So if you have the Cam Snaps rivet press specifically, they do sell a plastic snaps die, which works great for this. So I will be using the die as well as the hole punching tool in my Cam Snaps to insert my snaps today. Okay, let's talk about the other things. First, have a really good pair of fabric scissors handy. This is just to cut your vinyl, your fabric, all those bits. These are actually special embroidery type scissors. I cannot remember the name of them. I'll put it on the screen and I will have a link for them down in the description. We will need to be cutting very, very close to some stitches when we're getting our centerpiece all squared away. These curved scissors are perfect for that. I really like using these. When you're transferring your embroidery design from your computer to your embroidery machine, many of us will need to use a flash drive. This is just the most fun little thumb drive I've ever seen. It's from Tula Pink, and yes, you should get it in every color. If you're using any sort of sticky vinyl, I highly suggest these super non-stick needles from Schmetz. I will be using the 8012 today. You can also use these on your sewing machine when just sewing sticky vinyl, but I had a lot of problems with my regular needle getting stuck to the vinyl as it was embroidering and causing problems. These are a lifesaver. It's also good to have some Scotch tape on hand. You could also just use pins if you'd like, but we will need to be holding some things in place while we're working on our embroidery machine today. And the hoop I'm using today is just this larger oval hoop. This is a Bernina hoop. It measures about 8 inches by 12.5 inches. You do need a bigger hoop for this design since it is so long. Okay, last. These are tools I just like to have on hand every time I'm using my embroidery machine. The embroidery machine is one of those things that when it works so good, and it's such a game-changing item. However, when it doesn't work, it quickly becomes something you want to throw out the window. These tools here can solve a lot of those problems. The first tool I have is some super pointy tweezers. Any type of small thread that gets stuck underneath the plate in my sewing machine has a tendency to jam the entire thing. These are great at getting out those tiny threads that are a little bit farther back in those nook and crannies. I also like to have an oil pen ready to go. My machine is a thirsty girl, so she needs to be oiled sometimes. Embroidery designs take a lot out of the machine, so make sure you keep it well oiled. I have my tiny screwdriver because needles. And then a little brush for cleaning out any lint. Again, keeping the inside of the machine clean is very helpful. One of the biggest problems I've had with my machine are tension issues when it comes to embroidery. And again, I think it has a lot to do with using sticky vinyls. So I have this net right here, which will go over my top thread, as well as this thread holder. I find this thread holder works much better at keeping the thread at the right tension and from knotting or breaking, rather than using the thread holder on the top of my machine. So the first thing we want to do is prep our stabilizer. You're going to want the interior hoop here. You don't really need the exterior hoop yet. So take that center hoop and lay it on your stabilizer. You want some overhang around all 4 edges. And then I just cut about 1 inch or 2 away from the edge. So now you can see my stabilizer is quite a bit bigger than my hoop. Now I'm going to take my outer hoop and lay that right side up. So I have these little clips, so right side up. And then I'm going to lay my stabilizer over my outer hoop. And then I'll bring in my inner hoop and just tuck that in to my outer hoop. Now, if you have a Bernina like I do, you'll notice these hoops. On the bottom of the inner hoop, there's a little arrow. On the bottom of the outer hoop, there's a little arrow. You just want to make sure they line up at the same place. And now what I do is I just push that inner hoop down just a tiny bit. So it's not completely flush with the outer hoop. It extends just a tiny, tiny bit below that outer hoop. I was instructed to do this when I took a Bernina Get to Know Your Machine class. And the point of that was to make sure this plastic outer hoop doesn't scratch along the nice finished surface on the bottom of your machine. Once you have your hoop lined up just like you want it, tighten it up so that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch out our placement stitch, which is going to let us know exactly how big of a piece of vinyl we're going to need to use. All right, so I have my designs uploaded to that super cute little unicorn thumb drive. So I'm going to go click on my thumb drive icon right here. I'm going to click on Crashing Waves. And then I'm doing the bow mouse extender. So I'm going to click on that file. You'll see on my sewing machine I have a lot of these options. You can make 2 at a time, but today we're just going to make 1 at a time. And now you can see it has it all laid out. It shows you exactly how it's going to stitch it out. Gives you a suggestion on which hoop size you should be using. So now that I have this ready to go, let's go prep our thread. So I'm going to be using black thread for most of the design today. I'm going to grab my little thread jacket over here, and I'm going to insert it onto the bottom of my thread and pull it up, and then I'll have my thread coming out the top of the spool. Next, I have my thread holder and I have it extended all the way to the top. I'm just going to insert my thread onto the extender, pull the tail of my thread through the loop on the top, and now I can set this behind my sewing machine and then thread this end into my sewing machine just as usual. So once you have your machine threaded, now all we have to do is get started. So I'm going to select the needle icon. So now my machine is telling me to insert my hoop. So I'm just going to clip it in and then click OK. And the Bernina specifically, you'll see if you click this little color palette over here, it will show you each step, what it's going to be doing and where you're going to be using different things. You can change the colors too if you'd like. But we want to start on step 1, which is just an outline of our design, which allows us to make sure we have the right size vinyl. The absolute biggest tip I can give you with an embroidery machine is to always hold the tail well out of the way of the needle on the beginning stitches every single time you're stitching something. My Bernina will jam up the second this thread gets pulled down into the machine. It is a nightmare. So always hold your tail. So I'm going to hold the tail with one hand and then click begin. And then I'll just let the machine go on its own. Now once that placement stitch is done, I'm just going to cut my thread. And then now I'm going to remove the hoop so that I can lay out my vinyl. So you can see this is the design that we're going with. This just really gives you an idea of the size. So when you cut your vinyl or cork or whatever you're going to use as the main part of your exterior fabric, you need it to be bigger than this. So what I'll often do is just get my vinyl and just lay it over the hoop and just make sure it covers everything nicely. And then just cut it down like that. The nice thing about embroidery designs like this is that nothing has to be that precise. It just needs to be big enough. All right, now that your vinyl is in place and covering it, if you'd like, you can grab some tape and just tape it to the hoop just to make sure it doesn't move on the next few steps. This is optional. You could also just kind of hold it down with your hands, but you do not want to get your fingers anywhere near that needle because remember, you don't have control over what it's doing. It's just gonna go no matter what you do with your footsie. So you can see I just added some tape to those few edges. Now we're going to put this back on the sewing machine and we're going to do the next step. So step 2 is actually creating an outline of the center design. This is just like we did in the first step where we needed to make sure we had a piece of fabric that was big enough for the whole unit. This is going to stitch out an outline so we know what size fabric to use for that center Mickey design. Once again, I'm going to hold my tail before it starts stitching. And then I'll let it go after a few stitches, just to make sure it doesn't get sucked into the machine. There we go. Now we'll be fine. All right, once that second stitch is done, let's go ahead and trim our thread and remove our hoop. As I'm working with my embroidery machine, I'm always trimming the threads on the top and the bottom. Again, I think this is just machine dependent, but if my machine gets any of these tails inside, it's not going to work anymore. Okay, so now you see we have our vinyl laid down and we have our center design here. Now we're going to add our fabric over this. So grab your fabric, and if you have any specific design on your fabric that you want to use, now's a good time to look at it and cut it out. Oh my gosh, there's so many cute options on this fabric. I don't know what to pick. Let's see, I love this little snow cone bowl over here, so I'm going to try to make that my focal point. I'm not always successful at centering these designs, but it's fun just to try. This is also a great thing to do with scraps of fabric. If you wanted to use any sort of spray adhesive here, you are more than welcome to do that. I am going to take my fabric, and so I'm just going to put my thumb on that center design, and I'm just going to lay it right over the center of my little Mickey here. Maybe like that. And now I'm just going to tape this down. You just don't want this fabric shifting around, and since it's a smaller cut, you don't really want to hold it with your fingers too much because your fingers are going to get pretty close to that needle. Now, if you're a very experienced embroiderer, you go ahead and live on the edge. All right, there we go. I have my fabric covering that little center design, and I have it, I think, in the place I want it. So now we're going to add this back to the sewing machine, and we're going to move on to step 3. Okay, as always, hold my tail, push the green button, and you just have to hold it until it starts kind of going back and forth, and you know it's not going to get sucked down into the machine. And now you can see on the screen over here what it's doing. Now it's creating a stitch around that center design to really hold that fabric in place. If you wanted to stop at any point and cut your thread. So for example, I have this thread here. Maybe I don't want this to get stuck in the other stitches. You can always just click the same green button before and stop it, cut your thread, and then go back to it. So once step 3 is done, go ahead and cut your thread and remove your hoop. All right, once again, I'm going to trim down the threads on the back. I know that not everybody's machines are this picky, but if you are having constant problems, this is a good habit to get into. So now what we can do is just untape our fabric from the vinyl. And now this is kind of a tricky part. We want to cut our fabric around the outside of the stitched line as close as possible. That's where these little curved scissors come in. So I'm going to just get in here and I'm just going to cut as close as I can get to my stitches. You don't really have to worry about cutting your stitches. It is stitched down really well. So I take the fabric and pull it up while I'm cutting right next to those stitches, just like this. This is actually a lot easier to do if you have cotton lycra, because cotton lycra is very stretchy. So you can stretch it up a good amount and cut it, and the fabric will stay very, very close to those stitches. All right, now I'm going to go around, and if I have any little areas, like right here is a little corner, I'm going to trim that down. It's easier to trim it now than it will be after the next step. So you want to get as close as you can to these stitches right now to save work later. Oh my gosh, isn't that so cute? I just love these things so much. They're so fun. Okay, now we're going to put this back on the sewing machine and we're going to move on to step 4. All right, again, hold that thread. And now what we're doing is we're stitching the outline for the bow. Once that's done stitching, go ahead and cut your thread and remove your hoop. All right, let's go ahead and trim down our thread on the front and the back before we get started. So to be completely honest, I completely forgot about this step, which is why I didn't give you any sort of material suggestion for this. This is for the bow on your design, which is so cute. I actually happen to have some scrap of this bright red cork, so I think I'm going to use that for the bow. So as usual, I just need to cut a piece of this scrap that's bigger than my bow design. And it can be quite a bit bigger. That's okay. It's better to be too big than too small right now. So now, just like we did with this center design, let's take our scrap for the bow and lay it over so that it's well overhanging the entire bow. Grab some tape and just tape down the sides so this doesn't shift around on you at the machine. And now let's put this back in the machine and stitch down that bow. Say it with me, everybody. Hold that thread. Okay, once that step is done, go ahead and remove your hoop. Now you can remove the tape from your scrap. And just like we did with that center design, we want to cut as close as we can to these stitches on the outside. So just like before, I pull up on the fabric, not away, but actually up, and then just trim close to those stitches. Do your best to not cut the stitches. Also be careful when you're cutting here that your scissors don't slide into that fabric underneath the bow, and cut that because that would be sad. Once you have your bow cut and ready to go, now we're going to put this back in the sewing machine. This next stitch is going to create this beautiful satin stitch around the entire head, not the bow though. So up until now, all of our thread colors are really not going to be seen. This is going to be the first outline where you will see the thread color. So if you have a specific thread color that you want to use for the outline of the head, make sure you change your thread now. I will be using black thread for the outline of the face. So let's add this back to our sewing machine. Once you have that stitch done, let's go ahead and remove this from the hoop. Isn't that such a beautiful design? So this next step is going to be doing the exact same type of beautiful satin stitch, except it's going to be around the bow. So if you have a different color for the bow that you want to use, make sure you change out your thread. I will be changing it to this red thread for the bow, and then I will continue using the red thread for the remainder of the project. So let's go ahead and add our hoop back onto our machine. Grab that tail and let's stitch out the top of the bow. And just like before, I'm going to trim off the tail before I let it do the entire stitch. Okay, so once it's done with this bow, let's go ahead and cut our thread and remove our hoop. So we just did the satin stitch, and as you can see, I got a little too excited and moved on to the next step before we were supposed to. That's totally okay. We will go over this and fix it. It's not a big deal. So once you have this bow on, turn your hoop upside down, grab your felt or whatever you're going to use for the back, and we want to make sure we cut down our backing so that it's big enough to cover the entire back. So I'm just going to trim it just like this. Okay, so here's my cut. It covers the back just fine. So I'm going to use tape to hold down this back, but if I'm making a lot of these, normally what I'll use is this 505 spray, and I would just spray the back of my felt and then stick it on the bottom of my hoop just like that, and it works perfectly. However, if you use enough of that spray, it can gunk up your needle. Tape works as well, but you do have to watch it more because I do find that the tape likes to roll up and then stick to that metal bed of my sewing machine. And when that happens, the felt can actually fold on itself while it's embroidering, and then it doesn't turn out right. So you just kind of have to pay a little bit more attention if you're using the tape. All right, now that you have your backing stuck in place to the back of your hoop, we're going to insert this back into our sewing machine and finish sewing around the entire edge. I'm actually just going to restart at the beginning and sew over this again. All right, now that you have that stitched in place, you are more than welcome to remove this from your hoop and check the back just to make sure it caught everything. If you're good, move on to the last step. And this last step, step 9, is just marking placement holes for your snaps. We're just going to go ahead and let that run. Okay, you are now done with the design. You can remove this from your sewing machine and turn off your embroidery machine. All right, once you're all done with that, let's first clip all these threads. Those holes leave quite a few threads. Don't forget to trim down the back as well. You have those bobbin threads down here. All right, once you have it all trimmed down, you can go ahead and remove this from your hoop now. There we go. We can just take our hoop and put that to the side. Now this part might be a little challenging for some because it does require a steady hand. What we're going to do is we're going to cut around the outline of our entire extender. So you're going to have to do this on your own. I know. What I do is I go anywhere between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch away from the side of my stitches and just go nice and slow. If you're a little worried that you're not going to be very good at this, go wider away so that you can then slowly go back and trim it down. When cutting, it's easier if you move the entire vinyl rather than moving your scissors. So you'll see when I'm cutting, I kind of hold my right hand in place and then I move the vinyl around to help. And I just go, painfully slow. All right, once you have it cut out, go ahead and move your scraps out of the way. And now what you can do is just look and see if you have any of these little kind of jagged edges and just trim them down, smooth it out. This is one of those projects that, like, while you're cutting it, you're thinking, oh, I'm not doing a good job. But then you see it and you realize it's beautiful. Designs like this make situations that are not ideal more bearable and a little bit more beautiful. Okay, once you're happy with how you cut it out, let's go ahead and install our snaps. So like I said, there'll be 2 male snaps on the very ends and then 2 female snaps on the interior. So you can pick your colors however you want. Of course, I think I'm just gonna go pink. Pink everywhere. So you can see I have my male ends on the end and then my female ends in the middle. So I'm gonna use my rivet press with the hole punching attachment on it to punch these holes out. There are plenty of other options out there for punching these holes. So you're gonna punch a hole in every single one of these marked dots. Also, if you don't want to punch a hole in these, you don't have to. You could use an awl, which is just a very sharp, pokey thing like this, and push it through the center of these circular marks to create a hole big enough for your snap to get in there. For example, on these 2 other strap extenders here, I did just use an awl. I did not punch holes in it with my hole punch, just showing you different options. Now I'm going to attach my plastic cam snap die into my rivet press. So now take one of your caps and place that on the right side of your extender. Flip it over. Since I'm working on the end one, I'm going to grab my male attachment and put that right over the cap. If you're using the rivet press, you need to insert this with the cap side down, so it should snug right into the base of that press. And then the top will just push down the male end. Get it nice and tight in there, and there you go. Your snap is now installed. Now we're just going to repeat this process for the other 5 snaps. And once you have all of your snaps installed, you are now done. Your extender is adorable. So you can see I had to move my machine out onto my table today, and this is where it will probably stay for a few days. I'm going to bust out a few more of these strap extenders for some friends and family in preparation for August. So you can see I used fabric on this that matches my mask, which I think is perfectly a really sweet, fun idea. I'm going to attach this on the tightest section, and I'm going to try this on so you can take a look. And like always, we can just take our hair and lift it over it, and there we go. Nothing on my ears. Very easy. So I hope this tutorial was helpful to you. I know a lot of you guys were asking, how exactly do we make these strap extenders? It's a very simple process. There's very few steps, and if you have an embroidery machine, it does most of the work for you. Like I said, embroidery machines are fantastic when they work. Make sure to check out the Crashing Waves website because she has so many options. I would make one of these and a matching mask and then a matching sanitizer holder. She has the most amazing sanitizer holder designs. I make them all the time. I would make that as kind of like a little back to work, back to school, back to being around other people gift to, you know, put a smile on someone's face when there might be a little bit of anxiety. Tiffany, thank you so much for letting me film this tutorial. Make sure you guys go check out her channel. She will walk you through how to make so many other of her amazing designs. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye!